just to end with one ha'ara related to a Shoichet HaMesukenes, which is going to tie into some raid that we've spoken about recently. I saw in the Har Tzvi al Ashas, right here, Mesechtes Chulin, Daf Lamed Ches, it's really on tomorrow's Daf, and the source of this Har Tzvi is really from the Shilas Teshuvas Har Tzvi. It's in Yeridea Simin Tesvav. He brings a Maisa Shahaya Kachaya in the city of Brisk at the time that Agoyin, Reb Chaim Halevi Soloveitchik, was the Rav of Brisk. So there was a Maisa Shahaya Kachaya. There was a Shoichet who shechted an animal. He shechted over the animal perfect. And then he continued and he shechted the mi'ut basra of the animal and he did it b'shehiyah. While he shechted the mi'ut basra, the animal was not mefarches. It didn't show any sign of life. So Reb Chaim Halevi said that even though we know that if someone is shah b'mi'ut basra, the Shulchan Aruch says we're supposed to be machmer, like the teiku of the Gemara, lefi shitas Rashi, that shah b'mi'ut simanim is referring even to the mi'ut basra. But in this case, where the animal showed no sign of life at the mi'ut basra, it's going to be fine. You know why? Said Reb Chaim, because that's pashut. Once you shecht over the animal, at that point the animal is already a misukenes. What's the halacha of a misukenes? If it's mefarches and it shows a sign of life, well then the halacha is we assume the animal's alive. If, however, it's not mefarches and it doesn't show a sign of life, we assume the animal is dead. So Reb Chaim, that's poshut. That even Rashi's shita of shab and mi'ut basra as a teiku is going to be a problem. That's only if you assume the animal's alive. But if you assume the animal is dead, then the shab and mi'ut basra is nothing. Once the animal's dead, it's dead. Then for sure you got the rubai kakulay al yudei the roif. So Reb Chaim said this gewaldige chiddush, and the whole city of Brisk was tumbling about this chiddush. He said that even though there's halacha of shab and mi'ut basra, but at the same time, if he was shab and mi'ut basra and the animal wasn't mefarches, then we're going to look at it as if it's becheskas that it died already. If it died already, you don't have to worry about the fact that it was shab and mi'ut basra. So Rav Hersh Pesach Frank in his Har Tzvi says that as much as this chiddush is such a geschmack chiddush, v'divrei pi chacham chein, he said, but I have two problems with this chiddush. His first problem was as follows. Reb Chaim is assuming that when we say that an animal that's a misukenes, and then it doesn't show a sign of life, it's not mefarches during the shechita, the halach is you're not allowed to eat it. So Reb Chaim is assuming that the reason is because we assume that bevadai it's not alive. We're assuming bevadai it's not alive. And being that you assume bevadai it's not alive, l'chumra, to tell me that it's in a veil, I'm not allowed to eat it. Well, if that's the case, I would assume bevadai it's not alive, l'kula as well, and therefore if you were shab and mi'ut basra, and now you actually want the animal to have been dead, al yidei the shchita of the roif simanim, I'm going to assume that it was dead already, l'kula, and the shab and mi'ut basra is not going to be a problem. Obzak Reb Tzvi Pesach is a muchach to go azoi vayt. Maybe the fact that the animal was a mesukenes and didn't show a sign of life is not a vadai that it died, but maybe a mechash mi'abai. You have to be worried that maybe it died. So l'chumra to go ahead and eat it, it's a nisadei raisa, maybe of nevela. So we're not going to let you eat it. But to go l'kula and to be matir a shab and mi'ut basra, which according to Rashi later Ben Yeruchim that the tfur shab brings is also a shayla of the raisa, mechatesa we're going to be matir it. So said Reb Tzvi Pesach, Reb Chaim is never going to big anacha and mechatesa this anacha. So Reb Tzvi Pesach says, I know where Reb Chaim got it from. It's Lashon HaRambam. Of course, that's where Reb Chaim got it from. It's also a Lashon HaShulchan Aruch in Yeridea Simin Yud Zayin Sif Aleph. The Shulchan Aruch says, and it's a quote verbatim from the Rambam: "Hashoichet es hamisukenes v'loy pirches saklal harezu nevela v'loikim aleha." Oh, you get malchus. So said Reb Tzvi Pesach, it's pashut. That's where Reb Chaim was coming from. That in Shulchan Aruch state loikim aleha. Loikim aleha means it's bevadai mesa. So if it's bevadai mesa, no loishno lahachma v'loishno lahakal. By the way, loikim aleha is itself in a way kula, because you can't just give a person malchus. There's a lav in the Torah Yosef and Yosef. Elamai, we assume that if it's loy pirchas of the animal for sure died, even to give a yid malchus, well, if that's the case, for sure that knock out a Shitas Rashi of Shah b'miyut basra, we're going to assume it's dead, and if that's the case, it's not going to be a problem. But Rav Tzvi Pesach says it's not so pasha lahalacha. Again, the chap for sure from the Lashon HaRambam, this is the teretz. But at the same time, he says if you take a look at the Pri Megadim muches very much with why the Mechaber said, and it's based on the Rambam loikin oleh. It's you're so positive that the animal died. Maybe it wasn't mefarches because it wasn't mefarches. How could the fact that loy pirches, right? The fact it didn't do something, that's a raya that it was for sure dead, right? If you do something, that could be a positive raya. Not doing something is usually not considered a raya, right? But the bottom line is, the Pri Megadim muches very much with this kasha, and the Pri Megadim says that the only reason that the Rambam paskin and the Shulchan Aruch paskins that loikim aleh, it's because really every single bevhama we know is becheskas Isser kaima achi yivadalach until you know for sure that it's mutter. And what's the chazaka? So that's machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi learns it's the cheskas evim and achai. Tosfos learns it's the cheskas ein ezavuch. But says the Pri Megadim, it's tafka because betziruf to the fact that it wasn't mefarches is also a cheskas isser. That's why it's going to be like a malah. So says Rav Tzvi Pesach like the Pri Megadim, where it's only bevadai because of the cheskas ein ezavuch. You don't have the cheskas ein ezavuch to be mekel. So over there, the hadadina that it's not really a vadei. If it's not really a vadei, it could be Reb Chaim's ha'ara b'yara. Again, Reb Tzvi Pesach is not being the party pooper. He's having a geshmak in the ha'ara, just like we're all having a geshmak in the ha'ara. He just said it's a poisik. Halacha l'mais is not so pasha. Because halacha l'mais is done off in the Pri Megadim. And the Pri Megadim says that the only reason we assume it b'teiros vadei is because it's supported by the cheskas ein ezavuch. But that's only true la'achmin. That's not going to be true la'hakel. But then Reb Tzvi Pesach says another ha'ara. This I thought was very interesting. And that is, he says, if you take a look at the Taz says, why is it that if someone's sheikhta mesukenes, v'loi pirchas haklal, harizun avela v'loikim ala, right, such a sharf haloshen, says the Taz, harizun avela, the kimluhu l'rabanon, the zune tula nishmasa, koidem gemar shchitasa. Because there's an umdana that before the animal died, for sure, or before the gemar shchitasa, it already died. The kimlu l'rabanan, the zuna tulin nishmasa koidem gemar shchitasa. It's also the lashon of the lavush. The vaday nes alpha, it chalished, kishehergisha, as soon as it started experiencing the shchita, the yatsa nishmasa koidem gemar shchitas aroiv. And for sure it's neshama left before the conclusion of the shchitas aroiv. The crazy uplacey. The kimlu l'chachomim, the mesukene shehi betachlis hachulsha, kitchehis chalishchay ktasi monim, ein bakoyach lisboil oid, v'yoytzes nafsha, v'arei nevoila koidem agmar. The Taz and the Lavush and the crazy uplacey, all three said the same thing. That the chazaka is that before the completion of the shchita, it's going to die. Right? That's the cheshman. The cheshman is before the completion of the shechita, it's going to die. If that's the case, says Reb Tzvi Pesach, what's Reb Chaim saying? Reb Chaim saying as soon as you do roiv, there's no question in the world at that point, it's already going to be a misukenes. You shechted roiv, there's no shaila at that point that it's already going to be a misukenes. Okay, so if that's the case, if it's loy pirchasa, you're going to have a problem. So Reb Chaim, I can't even go l'kula, because the Rambam says it's a vada. The Rambam says loikamala. So you see, it even goes l'kula. So Reb Chaim, if you were shab and miyat basra, it doesn't matter, because you were shab and unavela. Zok Reb Tzvi Pesach, that would be true if the Taz and the Lavush and the crazy Uplacey would have said that the moment you start the shchita, it's Yatsa Nishmasa. But they all went out of their way to be madgish. It's before the Gemar. If that's the case, Zok Reb Tzvi Pesach, maybe when the Shochet started the Mi'ut Basra, when he started was still alive, then he was Shah. At that point, there wasn't an Avela yet. You're right, by the time he finished shechting the Mi'ut Basra, for sure it died. But maybe you were Shah before it died. And if that's the case, even if noniach, it's true, the chazaka works afilu l'kula, has nothing to do with the cheskes ein ezavuch. But l'maisa, it only is a chazaka by the Gemar. But being that he was Shah, maybe he was Shah before the Gemar. And if he was Shah before the Gemar, you're going to end up having a problem. In other words, Reb Tzvi Pesach says, this is Mamash's Lashon, you have to spout the Mi'ut Basra. Now we're really getting into it. Right? So till now, we're talking about the Roiv and then the Mi'ut Basra. You have to take the Mi'ut Basra gufa with a sakina charifa, and pun intended, and you have to go ahead and you have to spalt it. And you have to ask yourself, it could be the Shab and Mi'ut Basra was in the early part of the Mi'ut Basra, and it didn't die until it was already Roiv Ki'ilu of the Mi'ut Basra, right? Until you have the end of the Mi'ut Basra. And if that's the case, even if you make the Hanocha, like Reb Chaim's making, which is the Stimas, Lashon HaRambam, the Loika Pri Megadim, but at the same time, it's still not so passionate that this is the way it's going to play itself out. Either way, this is the tshuva and Hartzvi that we just read out. It's a short tshuva. It's in your Ideya, Siman Tesvav. The Shoyal, by the way, was Rabbi Yisrael Veltz. He was the Shoyal, and he was the one who told Rav Tzvi Pesach about this Ma'aser Shoyal Kach with Reb Chaim Brisker. And in as much as it's a very, very Geshmak Shayla, but in Halacha L'Ma'aser, Rav Tzvi Pesach was mefakfik very much. And it's interesting because Rav Tzvi Pesach Yedua had an incredible koyach te'teir. But when it came to this, he felt it wasn't so pashut the kula of Reb Chaim Brisker. But I just want to end with one ha'ara that I saw in the Sefer Mishnas Meseches Chulin, and this is from Hagoyin Reb Itamar Garbuz. And in Simin Chaf Aleph, he brings this shmur from Reb Chaim. He brings it from the Hartzvi, by the way. So it seems like the source of this Reb Chaim is the Hartzvi. That's where he brings it from. So he brings Ayin B'Shayos Shuvas Hartzvi, Rabbi Yisrael Veltz, this Ma'aser Shahoya Kachoya with Reb Chaim Brisker, and he asks one ha'ara. Again, it's beyond the scope of what we usually do, but we'll just end the hard week with his ha'ara. But it's really pashut, and I think subconsciously everybody's thinking this. And that is, said Rabbi Tamar Garbuz, I don't understand the whole Reb Chaim. I mamish don't understand it. Sounds so geschmack. Yeah, but there's seemingly a big hole in the cheshbon. You know why? Because it was mavur in our Gemara that every single animal, right before it dies, it's always in a state of misukenes. Now, ordinarily, when is an animal deemed to have been considered dead? When roivet the simon mashachat. Right? Rubai Kakulai. The extra mi'at basra is extra credit, then it's maybe called a moisef gereya. But as soon as you go ahead and you shech the roiv, that's usually when the animal is considered to have been dead. If the Gemara said that every single animal before it dies, it's a misukenes, it's pashut that it's true for shchita as well. And incidentally, the Gemara said it only regarding nevela, but there's no reason in the world to assume that it would be different between a nevela and a shchita. As a matter of fact, if you would think in svar, it's different between a nevela and shchita, meaning maybe by the ma'aser shchita you're not a misukenes before it dies, well then you would have a hechatimtza where you could have a nevela that wasn't a misukenes, which in the cheshbon of the Gemara can't be. You know what the hechatimtza would be? I'll tell you what the hechatimtza would be. If someone went ahead and did a shchita al yedei drasa, where the animal is going to be a nevela, because it's not a proper shchita, and you're telling me when it's done with a ma'aser shchita over there. So if you tripped up on one of the halachas l'Moshe Misinai, then you have to go back and chazal the Gemara. So it's pashut, because the Gemara said there is no hechatim, so we have an avela that wasn't a misukenes prior. That means that just like the mitzias of being a misukenes before it becomes an avela is true, it's also a misukenes before it's a shchuta, right? It's one and the same. So here's the point. The point is usually the animal becomes dead when you do roiv of the shchita. The Gemara says you're always a misukenes 1 second before it died, which means that right before you did the roiv, the animal's a misukenes. If Reb Chaim's gerecht, every single time you do the shchita, you should have to see the animal be mefarches when you do the roiv. Because if it wasn't mefarches, well, that would mean that it died already when it was in a state of misukenes and you never had a proper shchita. So Reb Chaim made this moirdig cheshbon. Reb Chaim said that you shab a mi'at basra, so I don't have to worry about it. You know why? Because it was a misukenes. It means that it wasn't mefarches. It means it was dead already. 1 second. In a regular shchita, when you shech the roiv of the siman, at that point it's already considered a mesa because roiv makes it into a shchuta. Well, if that's the case, it means it was a misukenes before the roiv. If it's dead before the roiv, you don't have a kosher shchita. You need it to be alive that 1 extra second in order to tip the scale to make it into a roiv. The only way for it to be determined that it's alive is if it's mefarches. So why isn't the halacha that every single time you shecht, at the time that you shecht the roiv, it should have to be mefarches? What's the teretz? So Rabbi Tamar Garbuz Shlita. The teretz is pashut because the halacha misukenes means far the shchita. That if before the shchita the animal was a misukenes, that's when you run into problems. But if the animal becomes misukenes machmas the shchita, so of course it's not an issue. Fakir, that is what shchita is. Shchita means shech the animal that's not misukenes, do roiv, and it's going to be dead. It could be every single time you do it, it's misukenes 1 second before. Good, that's all nichlal and what the Torah is telling you when it says v'zavachta kasher tzivisicha. You'll tell me misukenes usually doesn't work. That's when it's misukenes shaloi machmas hashchita. But obviously it's so pashut that when the Torah is being mitzvah, the mitzvah of shchita, and the Torah set up the system where it could be it becomes a misukenes before the right. Torah set up the system of yevamis with an eishasach. I don't know, but the bottom line, that's not a kasha. This is the way shchita works. So if this is the way shchita works, this is the way shchita works. Well, if that's the case, then there's mokum to say that klapi the mi'at basra also. Because what's the lumdus of Rashi's mi'at basra? The lumdus of Rashi's mi'at basra is that really shchita tutzach up in the ganze siman. We spoke from the Beis Halevi already a few times. It's just that Ruba is kakuloi. But when you shech the Mi'at Basra, really what you're doing is you're doing the shchita. Otherwise you couldn't be Shabbat Mi'at Basra. It wouldn't work. The teretz is because it's all the shchita. So a vifel, it's all the shchita. Who said there's a kpeda for me to have to worry and make sure that it wasn't mefarchis by the Mi'at Basra? Just like I don't care that it wasn't mefarchis when I went ahead and I shechted the roiv. I don't care if a second before the roiv it might have died al misukena. It's irrelevant as long as it was a ma'aser shchita that knocked out the roiv. Even if in 1 second earlier it died, that doesn't interessiert mich nicht, because it all happened machmas the shchita. So if it happened machmas the Mi'at Basra, when the Torah said v'zavach, Torah said shech the whole siman. L'chatchila you're even supposed to shech the whole siman. So you came up with a chap that once you shechted roiv of the siman, at that point it's a misukena. I need to be mefarchis by the Mi'at Basra. Every shchita you have that before you shechted the roiv, and I feel it doesn't bother me because it happened agab the shchita. So if it happened agab the shchita, it doesn't bother me. If it happened by the Mi'at Basra, it shouldn't bother me either. It's muchach. Said Rabbi Tamar Gabruz, Reb Chaim held there's a chilik fundamentally between shechting roiv of the siman versus the Mi'at Basra. And as much as this is so poshut that this is the cheshben in the Iker Shchita, but the Mi'at Basra is like its own thing, so to speak. And to the extent that we can dan that the animal's dead before the Mi'at Basra, being that it's kosher already, and I already have a kosher Shchita, I don't care what happens anymore in the Mi'at Basra. As it relates to the roiv, which is the Iker mitzvah Shchita, that's ma'akiv. So over there, the fact that it might have been a mesukenes before I got the roiv, that's going to not be an issue, because that is all included in what the Torah is telling you to do when you do a shchita, knowing that it might die a second before you shech the roiv. But that's a shchita. But as it relates to the Mi'at Basra, once I go ahead and I have an animal that already had a shchita, it could be then you could setail the Mi'at Basra and the roiv. Again, this is just thought-provoking lumdis, a little bit of a hashlama on what we spoke about earlier in the week. And we are going to stop here on Guten Erev Shabbos.